In our industry, in the college admissions industry, a lot of talk about what they call like trauma porn and personal statements, right? Like it's students writing about some of the worst moments in their life because they think that that will get them into these colleges and universities. And I want you all to know that you do not have to perform in that way.
Hello, welcome back, dear virtual little siblings and parents. We're back with Fedjounie from Quad Education, and in this interview, we're going to be talking about those college essays, specifically how to begin, how to edit them, how to evaluate whether you're on the right track. In the previous video, we focused a lot on this concept of a formula or strategy, and honestly, there is also kind of a formula and strategy when it comes to college essays. I know Fedjounie has a lot of thoughts and great insights on this topic, so I'll just turn it to her. But before I do so, don't forget that Quad is offering free intro calls. I'll drop the link in the comment section and description below.
Come work with me.
So let's talk about college essays. How to begin? What's the strategy here? What do you think, Fedjounie?
Honestly, for a college essay, the best strategy is to go in very open-minded. There are 7 prompts that are outlined on the common application. An activity that I love to recommend to my students is picking out of those 7, 2 or 3 right prompts and just free writing without a purpose or intention, but really thinking about what your first response or reaction is to that question or that prompt, and then thinking about how you can fit that into a story, right? If you want to show a college that you are a dazzling student athlete who is going to change the world by going into medical school, what about you or the experiences that you've had reflect that? It's more so finding out person that you want the admission committee to know you to be, and then thinking about the things that have happened that help you demonstrate that. Specifically, thinking about how the essay fits into all other aspects of your application, I think is the biggest key, especially in the college admission games. It is a holistic process. Thinking about what is said across those items is very important. Some students, they may have struggled a year in AP Calculus, right? But they had a really strong relationship with their teacher who was writing them a letter of recommendation, and they allowed their teacher to, in that letter of recommendation, speak about how they struggled with math, and they were able to still get the highest grade in the course that term, even though it wasn't an A, it was a B, right? Like that teacher is able to provide that context to something that's happening on the transcript, but it's a way for then the student not to have to tell all of that, right? Like you don't have to explain why you didn't have that great semester in math, and you can spend more time in your personal statement thinking about reflecting other characteristics or attributes that you'd like to portray.
Definitely. I think step number 1 is just knowing what's required of you. Again, super duper simple, bare bones. What are the prompts? I know a lot of you guys are also applying to UC schools. So some of our students actually begin by responding to the UC PIQs, the UC personal insight questions. Don't even judge. I think a lot of students, they get really paralyzed and caught up just right already at that stage. Just focus on putting the ideas onto the page. And good ideas are just a function of the number of ideas. If you're able to put down 10, 15, 20 responses to those questions, they are kind of designed in a way that should be pretty easy to answer. Actually, what I've realized too, helping a lot of students, and I think Fedjounie kind of mentioned this, but your best responses tend to be the most natural ones. And I think a lot of students kind of second guess that instinct, but actually the path of least resistance tends to make for some really great essays. The next step is to consider like, what are the key themes and characteristics you really want to convey? Then the editing process is kind of about bringing those two closer together. But at the same time, there are a lot of moving parts. There's the recommendations, there's supplemental essays. So a great exercise that we like to do with our students is to just draw a simple Venn diagram. These can be 2 or 3 different Venn diagrams, one for your main Common App, one for your supplementals, one for your recommenders and guidance counselors, teachers. What's really common is the recommenders will talk about intellectual curiosity, maybe some perseverance. So then you know, okay, I'm good. I don't really need to emphasize that as much in my Common App or supplementals. It will still be good to touch upon it, but in a different way. So what does that different way really look like? It could be embedding intellectual curiosity, but with something like service. And again, you don't want to regurgitate what's on your activities list either. Typically, your essays should be about things that cannot be found anywhere else in your application. It's really a chance to showcase your humanity, your personality, not just who you are as a student, but who you are as a person, as a human being. Yeah, what are some other tools, tips, tricks, strategies students can utilize when beginning this process? I feel like honestly, starting is the hardest part.
Yeah, I think starting off by like personal statements. A really great resource that I always recommend to my students is Essays That Work. This is a website, and if you go there, they actually have essays that have been organized based on like schools that students have been accepted to, the topics that students discussed, and you can read past essays that have worked. In our industry, in the college admissions industry, a lot of talk about what they call like trauma porn and personal statements, right? Like it's students writing about some of the worst moments in their life because they think that that will get them into these colleges and universities. I want you all to know that you do not have to perform in that way. And oftentimes it places the admission officer in an awkward situation because they have to report whatever assault or situation that you disclose on your personal statement.
What we recommend students do sometimes, if you really want to talk about that, is you can briefly mention it in your additional information section in sort of a much more report-like or matter-of-fact way. You can just be like, okay, at this point in time, I suffered XYZ injury or ABC thing happened to my family. As a result, I wasn't able to, and you can kind of elaborate on that in the additional information section. Now, that being said, there is a way that it could work in the Common App essay. There's a reason why people do it because it can be successful. But just remember that more than half of the essay should be about you overcoming this challenge, not about the specific details of the challenge itself. Ultimately, this is a hero's journey story, right? You are rising above these kinds of challenges and circumstances. That's what we're interested in hearing about. And not just like what you did, but also how you grew, the way that you approach life differently as a result of this experience. That's where the true, gold and champions are made. That's what you should focus on.
Along those same lines, I always emphasize, right? Like you said, the hero's journey. So thinking about literary tools, right? Like the ways that you are able to use grammar, spelling, prose, right? To push forth the narrative is very indicative to admissions officers of your capacity, right? Like your ability to write, which is most like top colleges and universities, freshman, first year students are mandated to take writing seminars. Right? Like you have to improve your skills as a writer so that you can enter into that academic conversation, whatever field it may be, but that is the root training that we receive. And admissions counselors are looking to see where students are at as it relates to those skills.
So with regards to building in more literary aspects into your essays, I have several really exciting strategies that I want to share. One is just simple low-hanging fruit again, upgrading your writing using a good simile, metaphor, even a powerful one in your hook. Instantly that's going to stand out amongst like hundreds of other essays. So that's kind of very surface level icing on the cake. Another tactic, literary device that I see used a lot is kind of like a motif in a college essay. And I've seen this used successfully many, many times, like essays that worked. So you see a motif like a bonsai tree or a teddy bear or a pen, a fountain pen. And the student uses this object to tell a story about how they've grown over the course of owning this object, how they acquired it. Those essays can be really successful and they're really great for kind of like middle class students who maybe they're like, oh, I don't have some crazy challenge that I've overcome. You can also use a place. It could be like a tree house that you and your father built. Those work wonders. Really, really successful essays. So you must have read and edited dozens of essays, Fedjounie. What are some of the most common or like the biggest red flags that you see?
I think the biggest red flag that I have seen, and I think this is something that a lot of students just do, is that their essay isn't about them.
Oh.
Yes, like it's about your mom or your grandma or like how your sister influenced you, right? Like if you are writing an essay about someone who has been inspirational to you, how you can bring it back to self. Every paragraph, checking like, okay, how does this relate to me?
Oh my goodness, guys, we've seen this happen time and time again. Maybe like a quarter of the essays that we get aren't even about the student themselves. Like we're not trying to admit your cousin, your aunt, your grandfather, your mom who had a big impression on you. We are trying to admit you. And in order for us to do that, we need to see your actions, your contributions. So think of the relationship as a two-way street. Yes, this other person is doing things for you, maybe in front of you, and you're picking up on that. Then you have to talk about how the way they operate has influenced you to make positive changes. That's like the missing ingredient. And then you can kind of bridge the gap and talk a bit about your conclusion, reflection, the key character traits that you want to showcase. The other issue, stories with no end. We read the essay, us as counselors, us as admission officers are kind of just left wondering, what was the main idea? What was the point?
Yeah.
So in order to fix that, guys, just go in and just write down the 2 words that you want to communicate in this essay. It could be courage, it could be fearlessness, it could be determination, it could be curiosity. Make sure those ideas are clearly articulated in that conclusion. I think that really good essays, they tend to have a mix of 2 or 3 different themes. So don't just make them one-dimensional. I'd say that's a bit of a yellow flag or red flag that I see. Like the essay is just purely about my determination to overcome this academic challenge or sports injury. If you can combine it with another dimension, that tends to make for really, really interesting and memorable essays. So
I agree. Ooh,
Yeah. Oh,
and just
go
a
ahead.
slight yellow flag. Language. When you are trying to convey like a special word, always add a mini translation. And that goes to another point about readability. Some places they have a differentiated process, right? Where you have like regional like admissions counselors, they will represent a region and they'll read all of the applications from that region. And then they would present the students that they're like most advocating for.
What you don't want to do is alienate your reader. So if you include a bunch of foreign language terms, honestly, guys, I wouldn't write more than 2 or 3. I've seen students write entire sentences in a different language, and that you're kind of wasting words at that point. But the same thing can be applied for like really specific terminology. If there's really specific medical terms, or for instance, I breakdance and I'm mentioning like these crazy breakdance moves, but people don't know what they are, that can be a bit of a red flag. You can kind of define them, but honestly, you can use your creative expression when doing so. And you can say, okay, this word, here's the dictionary definition, but here's what it means to me, right? Like a Portuguese word, like saudade, for instance. Here's what it, means in general, but here's kind of what it means to me. And honestly, that's not a bad way to kind of begin an essay as a hook. Another point that Fedjounie made, which was about making it super easy for your admissions officer to defend you, because that's the way admissions works. There's somebody who gives your application an initial read through, and then they're like, oh wait, this guy, they're onto something, and they pull you out of the pile. Then they have to defend you and argue for why you deserve to be at this school in front of other admissions officers. And you want to make that really easy. Here's how you do that. Again, you simplify your kind of profile into maybe just a few keywords and be like, okay, this is the breakdancing biology kid. Here's why he deserves to be at Yale or Princeton. That's literally how the process works, and that's how they argue for you. Ultimately, admission officers are looking for diverse classes and not necessarily diverse individuals. So that's why you don't want to be the kid who showcases 8 bajillion different activities. You kind of want to emphasize a few key points.
I definitely agree. And that triggered a thought for me. Thinking about institutional priorities, right? When writing and completing your applications, this is more general to the personal statement, but your applications as a whole, a lot of schools communicate the types of students that they're looking for. They give you the characteristics outright, and you can use that when thinking about, okay, what do I want to convey in my personal statement?
Right.
So doing that research will really help you during that process. And you'll often see that on the admissions page. I always share with my clients, teaching them how to use that space because it is such a great resource. You can use it to research teachers, right? Or professors or events that the school is hosting to see how you would fit on that campus. It's for extracurricular development, right? Princeton used to host hackathons. High schoolers could participate in those hackathons, right? So looking to see if they had local events that you could attend to learn more about what was going on campus.
Another red flag is just not doing the research. I really think that a lot of students neglect that. They obsess over the Common App, then they leave their supplementals to the last minute. All of a sudden their research is rushed, if it's there at all. But make sure you guys are spending at least it doesn't need to be dozens of hours, but I would say a solid 3 to 5 hours on a school, their admissions pages, looking at even things like commencement speeches or Instagram pages of the clubs that you want to be a part of. That can be the thing that gets you in. One way of doing research is much more general, as Fedjounie was alluding to, kind of looking at the mission statements, what the school really cares about. Columbia, for instance, makes it really easy. On there, literally, they have a page called What We Look For. They mention academic preparation, curiosity. So it could be really smart to make sure that you're nailing that curiosity in your Common App, in your supplementals. And a really cool thing you can do is kind of add an adjective in front. So you could say, I'm actually really curious about religion, and I've looked at all these different religions in my past. I'm really curious about emotions, and I've done a lot of research into the history of emotions, how they develop. But another thing that you guys can definitely take advantage of is looking at the school's newspaper. This can be news from the students themselves, or it could be news from the administration. So the news from the administration tends to be way more like, okay, here's really cool research that professors have published. And then the news from students tends to be a lot more,
here's what's happening on campus.
Here's the tea on campus.
Right.
So that's a really great way to figure out if this school is going to be a good fit for you. A quick little tip too is you can read the articles and potentially even email the person who wrote the articles and try to get in touch with them, ask them some follow-up questions, and that's a great way to show your interest in the school. So that's what we mean when we say research, guys. It's not just like, okay, I looked at the website, I copy pasted one paragraph, moved it around. That's not good enough. That's like that's the bare minimum. But if you guys can go above and beyond, watch vlogs, go on YouTube, take a look at students who have day in the life videos. There's no excuse anymore. Even I have students who are in Asia and Africa and still able to perform this level of really detailed, rigorous research. So I know you guys can do it too.
Reach out to professors too, right? That you admire at the schools that you're interested in. Like read an article or two and then reference it in the email.
Yes, that's how you personalize it. That's how you get a higher open rate, response rate. Yes. It's not enough to just be like, hi, please let me work at your lab.
Right.
If you can reference the work that they've done and even connect it to an extracurricular or something you've done in the past, that's only going to help you. So we're nearing the end of this interview. I really hope you guys found it helpful, useful. I know the college admissions process can be a little bit scary, but hopefully with the more you know, the less daunting it feels. And if you guys have any questions at all, please leave them in the comment section below. Again, Quad is offering free intro calls to everyone who accesses the link in the comment section description below. So definitely take full advantage of that. Fedjounie, do you have any final thoughts or comments you'd like to share before we wrap things up?
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. To all of the SIBs and parents out there, just be you. You can make your personal statement entirely your own, and definitely seek our help and support with that process, or take advantage of all the free resources online. There are so many free resources. But yeah, I hope you all found this very informative.
Thank you again for watching until the end. Until next time, take care. Bye.